My name is Catherine Hurley, and I'm the Sustainable Programs Coordinator here at the City of Evanston. And I'm here to provide the presentation on community choice electricity aggregation. Before I get started, I would like to acknowledge Mr. Dave Stoneback, our Utilities Director, who's here in the audience and can also help provide backup on questions that may be out there. Consumer choice electricity aggregation aims to reduce the supply side of a customer's electricity bill. Here on the slide, we have an example of a typical residential ComEd electricity bill. The first charge on the bill is for the electricity supply, and the second is for the delivery. So as you can see up here, this first part is the electric supply, and then the second part is the electric delivery. And right now, as you can see, electric supply services, there's no name next to it, and then delivery services say ComEd. ComEd purchases electricity for customers who have not selected an alternate supplier for that electricity and passes that cost on through to the customers on that top portion of the bill. The supply charge of the bill is approximately 60%, and the delivery charge is the remaining 40%. So in the sample bill, we have the supply charge of the $35, and then we have the total bill being $61. Community choice electricity aggregation allows municipalities the option to bundle together or to aggregate residential and small commercial retail accounts with the goal of seeking cheaper supply rates from the alternate electric suppliers. The goal of these efforts is to secure a lower energy rate for the residential and the small commercial retail accounts that would be included in the aggregation. Under community choice electricity aggregation, ComEd continues to deliver the energy and to provide the billing functions and customer service to the aggregated customers. In Illinois, there are two significant milestones in the last 15 years which have led us to the consumer choice electricity aggregation. The first occurred in December of 1997 when the state of Illinois enacted their Consumer Choice Act, which implements the state's plan to deregulate energy supply in Illinois. As a result of the act, power supply can be purchased through suppliers approved by the Illinois Commerce Commission, and all customers have the option to choose their own supplier. To date, many large industrial, commercial, and institutional customers have taken advantage of this choice and switched their accounts to an alternate supplier. ComEd continues to purchase electricity for those customers who have not selected their own supplier. The second milestone was on August 10, 2009, with the passing of Public Act 960176. This act allows municipalities the option to bundle together or aggregate residential and small commercial retail electric accounts. This has been referred to as community choice aggregation, with the goal of the efforts to secure lower energy rates for the supply side of the residential and small commercial accounts, most of which have not taken advantage of consumer choice, and thus the reason for passing the act. Public Act 960176 governs the process for municipalities to implement the aggregation program. The act includes the exact language needed for the public question, which must be passed by a binding referendum in order to authorize the municipality to implement a community choice electricity aggregation program. So as I stated, in order to have a community choice electricity aggregation question placed in the ballot, the City of Evanston needs to pass an ordinance allowing for the submission of the question to the electors of the community. On October 24th, City Council directed staff to prepare the documents necessary for a ballot submission, which included an ordinance that they then passed on November 29th, allowing for the submission of the aggregation question to the electors of Evanston on the March 20th primary general election. So the ballot question is, shall the City of Evanston have the authority to arrange for the supply of electricity for its residential and small commercial retail customers who have not opted out of such a program? And I'll talk about the opt-out process in a little bit. This slide outlines the general process required for a community to implement a community choice electricity aggregation program once the City Council or other body has got the question on the primary election ballot. So first, the voters of Evanston are presented with a binding referendum question asking whether they grant the city the authority to solicit competitive bids for the electric supply. The binding referendum must be passed by a simple majority at the March 20th general primary election. If at this point the referendum does not pass, this process would stop at this point and we would be done. If the referendum does pass, the city could then conduct a competitive proposal process. I'll talk about more on the next slide. The city will review the proposals and would determine if they meet the city's criteria that would be set forth by City Council. If the city finds that one or more proposals meets the criteria, then the city could select one supplier to enter into an agreement on behalf of all of the residential and small retail commercial accounts. However, if no proposals meets the city criteria, then the city can reject all bids, and again, the process would stop. If a proposal is favorable, then the city would select a supplier, a contract duration, which would result in a price for electricity. After this price and the contract duration is published, all customers will have the option to opt out of the aggregation program. Customers that do not opt out would start to receive their energy supply from the new supplier following the transfer process. So based on a hypothetical scenario, if the referendum were to pass and if the proposals were to be favorable and each decision point was passed, then the supply from the new supplier would start sometime over the summer, depending on how quickly or slowly things moved. This slide is intended to provide a little bit more information on that competitive selection process. So if the referendum were to pass, then the city could proceed with conducting a competitive selection process to identify which alternate retail electric suppliers would be able to provide energy supply for the residential and small commercial retail accounts. So there's three main phases. I called the first one the pre-qualification phase of the suppliers. So a request for proposals would be sent to all of the 14 alternate retail electric suppliers that are approved by the ICC. Based on those responses, the city would pre-qualify the responsive and responsible bidders. Items to consider during this phase would include the financial stability, past history with municipal aggregation, number of municipalities they are currently supplying energy to, willingness to execute an agreement with the city, etc. During phase 2, the city would develop the aggregation plan and policy. The aggregation plan of operation and governance is required by the state law, and it was included in the public act that I mentioned. It's used as a guiding document for the city and the alternate suppliers during the process. The aggregation plan will include items such as the city's cost-saving goals, the city's criteria for evaluating the proposals, options for green energy, and options for contract duration. During this time, the city is required by the law to hold at least 2 public meetings to receive input on the draft aggregation plan. Following the public input and revisions to the plan, City Council will need to adopt the final aggregation plan via ordinance. Staff will also advise City Council on developing a policy to help evaluate and select the contract options from the supplier. The policy will provide guidelines for selecting the term of the contract and the use of green energy and any other options that City Council is interested in. The policy recommendation will take into consideration all the information that the city received during the pre-qualification process, the current market rate of electricity, and ComEd's rate. The final step under phase 2 will be to recommend City Council approve a resolution that would authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute the most favorable proposal at the completion of the competitive process based on that policy guidelines. This will allow the city to get prices on the most favorable day rather than the exact date. Phase 3 is used to select the firm price proposals and then potentially select a supplier if any of those proposals are favorable. The city will send a request for proposals to the pre-qualified suppliers. The proposal details will be reviewed and the proposed electricity rates compared to the current ComEd rates. The city will also compare the proposals to the pre-established policy guidelines which City Council have approved in order to narrow in on that duration and any percent of green energy. If the proposals are favorable and the supply rates are lower than the ComEd rate, then the city manager would be able to negotiate and execute a contract with the alternate retail electric suppliers based on those predetermined policy guidelines. The competitive process for evaluating and selecting a supplier is a critical part of this process, and the city's Utilities Commission will be assisting staff in the process and will help review and provide input on all documents related to the program. As I mentioned previously, if the referendum were to pass, all members of the aggregation pool would have the option to opt out of the aggregation process. This slide shows a sample letter that was sent to all residential and small commercial retail accounts notifying them of the aggregation program. The letter includes the term and conditions of the program as it was in Oak Park. There was also a phone number, email address, and website where customers could decide to opt out. This type of opt-out information would be sent via email to all Evanston residents, would be posted on the city's website, as well as mail letters would go out to the whole community if we were to be moving forward. In Oak Park, all customers were also sent a separate postcard that acted as an opt-out form, and the customers could complete alternate to the phone, email, or web. And as you can see here, notification to opt out, you could simply check the box saying, I would like to opt out, and then put your name and your address, and that would be another opt-out method. If a supplier were to be selected, they would be required to help with the opt-out process and to work closely with the city and ComEd to make sure that each residential and small commercial retail account ended up in the proper group. To date, a total of 19 communities have implemented a community choice electricity aggregation program. On average, those communities saw a savings of approximately 25% on the supply side of their bill. 75 communities in Illinois in Cook County have placed a community choice aggregation referendum on the March ballot. And here are the communities in Cook County. So to summarize, the community choice electricity aggregation can potentially provide a lower energy rate for residential and small commercial retail customers on the supply side of their bill. The process allows for the qualifications of the alternate retail electricity suppliers to be reviewed. The plan of operation and governance can include a request for suppliers to provide the option of a cleaner energy mix and a variety of contract durations. ComEd remains responsible for delivery, billing, and customer service for all the accounts included in the aggregation. However, specific questions to the supply side part of the bill are questions that would go to the new supplier. Customers who have chosen to be part of the aggregation are unable to take advantage of ComEd's real-time pricing program. So the next steps, we have, as the city manager mentioned, several more community meetings scheduled. We had the Fifth Ward meeting on January 19th. We have 2 more all-community meetings on February 23rd and March 8th. And then we currently have the following meetings scheduled to go to specific ward meetings. And if additional meetings are scheduled, they'll be posted on the website and included in city correspondence and information. And then the electors of Evanston will have the opportunity to vote however they feel on the March 20th general primary election ballot on community choice electricity aggregation.